Alright, so I'm pretty sure that everyone is already at the very least aware of the worldwide phenomenon that is Kagurabachi. This series had one of the most explosive starts ever because of the memes and brain rot surrounding this one particular image. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I'm usually not particularly a fan of the weekly read schedule, and it takes a really good series for me to actually put myself through the weekly drag. So I did what everyone else did. I read like half of chapter 1 when it initially came out, enjoyed the clean art but didn't really understand where it was going, and put it down to let it build up some chapters. Needless to say, when I finally got back to reading it again 31 weeks later, I did not expect to be this invested already. The setting, the rich history, the diverse stakeholders, the entertaining cast, the theme of everyone having a different interpretation of who Chihiro's dad was and what that meant for them, it's all so good. But that's not particularly what I wanted to talk about in this video. What I wanted to talk about was how the story's second arc surrounding the 208th Rakuzaichi completely subverted my expectations of how I thought the story would go in potentially the greatest way possible. Beware that there are spoilers for the series ahead, so if you haven't read Kagurabachi yet and would like to do so, then now is your chance. So coming into this arc, we had just come off of the first arc with Sojo, which in many ways serves as an introduction to what I assumed would be staples in the series that are only going to get built upon more and more. A good example of this being the power system with sorcery and the enchanted blades. We get little trinkets of information here and there, like how sorcery works, what the enchanted blades are made of, and why the enchanted blades were made in the first place. It's all good story building. But one particular aspect of the series that I found to be really interesting was how Chihiro has lived with his father for pretty much all of his life, yet no one knows of his existence aside from Shiba. We also knew from the Sojo arc that the general public is only aware of the 6 enchanted blades, meaning that enten must have been made after the war when Kunishige went into hiding. I figured that since Chihiro was alive at the point of enten being made, combined with the fact that Chihiro was always helping his father with blacksmithing work, that it meant that he may have unknowingly picked up some of his father's skills. Keep this in mind. At the end of the Sojo arc, Chihiro in his epic battle with Sojo manages to actually break Sojo's enchanted blade, the Kuregumo. Then, in the following arc about the Rakuzaichi, Hokazono starts to establish the Sazanami storehouse sorcery. So naturally, my first thoughts here were that this has to be set up for Hakuri to eventually inherit the ability from his father at the end of the arc. Then Chihiro would use Hakuri's ability to store all the enchanted blades, and then eventually figure out his father's secrets of how he made the blades. It being something along the lines of that he essentially knew it all along, since he's seen his father work every day, but that he just hadn't put the pieces together yet. I really thought that it would be an epic journey of Chihiro battling sword wielders one by one, him breaking them, and then later fixing them to restore and solidify his father's legacy. But then the unthinkable happened. Hokazono essentially said that I needed to reassess my expectations because he knows he can do better. And better he did, because every single thing that I thought would happen was masterfully subverted. Chihiro, after being forced to give up his enten blade, now took over the broken Kuregumo, used it to its absolute limits, told it to lock in, and then went even further beyond. Chihiro went so far that Kuregumo actually broke beyond repair, completely shattering my expectations that he would one day repair the blades and his dad's old legacy. Aside from that, the arc further established the Hishaku and that their goals aren't as one-dimensional as they seemed at first. I didn't expect for the endgame mastermind to already have an encounter with Chihiro. Granted, a lot more recent shonen have had their main characters have early encounters with the endgame villain, like Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen, and the Elusive Samurai. But for some reason, I felt as though Kagurabachi might just stick to the mold here and introduce them late. Introducing Yura so early here is a great choice, since he and his gang were the ones responsible for turning Chihiro's life upside down. It'll give us as readers time to build up the same emotional weight that Chihiro has been feeling all this time. Side tangent, at the start of the story, it feels like Chihiro is this huge, stern, stoic, unemotional edgelord. But this encounter with Yura really puts into full spotlight that it's all just a front, or even just a coping mechanism of sorts. Deep down, Chihiro is a person who really cares about people, and this arc really helps display that even more than the previous arc did. Back to the Hishaku. Their leader Yuta seems to be a fairly strong sorcerer, but not broken levels of strong. He reveals that everything he's been doing and putting into place until now was so that he could eventually wield the Shinuchi. Shinuchi here just meaning best or highest quality item, but the sword's actual name is Magatsumi. Anyway, Yuta being the mastermind type of villain was not something I expected, and is always very welcome if it can be pulled off properly. He was pretty nonchalant about his injuries that Chihiro gave him, so I assumed that he's the kind of guy who has backup plans for the backup plans. I expect that as the story goes along, that we'll get more and more information about Yuta's true intentions, motivations, and goals. Some other things that caught me by surprise were that Hakuri was special and gifted from birth because he had inherited 2 types of sorcery, which is pretty abnormal. The arc elaborates further on the Kamunabi, how they're basically stuck between a rock and a hard place, which forces them to also antagonize Chihiro for the time being, since no one knew of his existence of course. The Sazanami family meets a tragic yet beautiful end. Chihiro gains far more allies than expected. We even get a small taste of just how powerful the enchanted blades truly were during the Seitei War. Just like how Sojo was able to wield Kureguma from a distance and shred the Kamunami members apart, Chihiro now also learns to do the same with enten, as he uses it to help Hakuri teleport all the prisoners out of the storehouse. Kyora then slightly manages to unsheath Magatsumi, and even just this alone is enough to give its contracted wielder, who's being held in protective custody somewhere far away, a strong enough connection to the sword that he almost kills everyone at that Akuzaichi. I'm also wondering if Magatsumi was possessing its wielder and made him evil in the process, but I'll leave that for another video. If Magatsumi was this powerful from such a far distance away while barely unsheathed, then just imagine how powerful it actually was at the height of the Seitei War. And this leads me into my next point, how it's starting to seem more and more like Chihiro and enten are the true legacy of Kunishige Rokuhira. See, we still don't actually know what the Seitei War even was. What were they fighting for? Who were they fighting against? We guaranteed know for sure that it wasn't a battle of sword wielders, as the enchanted blades were made for the very sake of trying to put an end to the war. Kunishige, similar to our real-world counterpart of Oppenheimer, must have known that the enchanted blades were far too powerful to control once the war had ended and the years go by. It seems to me like he created enten with the sole purpose of being an anti-enchanted blade weapon. Kuro allows for simple and complicated attacks, Aka allows for defense against sorcery, as it can absorb, store, and redirect it, and Nishiki allows for mobility to keep up with the other enchanted blades. It's a very simple moveset compared to the other blades, yet that works in its favor to be a jack of all trades, allowing it to be effective against everything. The fact that the Kamunabi opted for sealing the blades and restricting the sword bearers means that they most likely weren't able to destroy the blades and the threat that those pose. Yet, despite that, Chihiro was able to break Kuregumo using his own enten, which in my opinion gives credence to the idea that enten is an anti-enchanted blade weapon. Even Hiyuki and Tafuku think that it's impossible to break one, but more on that in another video. All in all, I'm very excited to see where this story is going. The Swordbearer assassination arc is fully underway with some crazy moments, and it's been really good to read weekly. Kagurabachi already passed its 1-year anniversary, which means that it's safe to say that it survived the Shonen Jump acts that a lot of beginner manga face. With the amount of things being set up, combined with the crazy pacing, this series has such a bright future and I cannot wait. I'll continue to read the series more and more. I'm not super knowledgeable on the series yet since it's still quite young, receiving developments weekly, but if there are any topics that you'd like me to cover on the series, let me know. JJK isn't going away from the channel either, by the way. I still have quite a few topics that I'd like to cover on the series as well. And as long as I have ideas, I might just continue covering it until the anime finishes, to be honest, even if it doesn't garner as much attention anymore. With that being said, thank you for watching, your support is always much appreciated. See ya!